was a full day, they got it done. Yeah.
How much does it get for
Make sure we speak loud enough
No, it was funny, like, how did you take Old Orchard? So one of, somebody on this, yes, went there, and it was between us and 2 other schools, but they wanted like a drive-up lane in front of the school, so it worked out perfectly. They didn't know this when it came out, but somebody knew what was going on.
There was a cashew in my repertoire, like,
The message.
I'm not into Facebook.
I'm sorry, not Facebook.
No, it's like the
Oh, it's right at the edge.
But yeah, I don't even add it into an alumni.
How do I?
You are alumni.
If you YouTube like Ego,
I'm not gonna wrap the hammer. I'm not that level, but we bring the hammer
I'm shooting the orchard in that Lego ad. I figured
That's okay.
That's cool.
Good evening, everyone. I am your understudy for the first few minutes of the meeting. I am playing the role of Dr. Belle Jordan, who will be playing the role of Joe Ruffner in a few minutes when she arrives. So we can start with the roll, I think.
Belle Jordan. Joseph.
Here.
Vonnegut.
Here.
Ruffner.
Present.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Warshaw. Thank you.
And I hereby open the public hearing on the adoption of the 2023-2024 proposed budget. And I believe Mr. Barry.
sorry. So here's a budget comparison, looking at last year's final budget in the FY23 column. The tentative budget presented to the board in June of this year, and then the final budget in the last column. Looking at major changes, we look at the capital projects fund, just basically getting a new estimated pay calendar for summer 2024 on capital projects, kind of lowered that dollar amount. Other material differences are additional staff and transportation for new ECC routes. Education fund dropped just based on final salary numbers when looking between June and finalizing them now in September. So overall, compared to last year, we are up, but that is paying off the end of the Stenson renovation project and then the beginning of the Devonshire renovation project, which not all of it was in the final budget from last year.
Anybody have questions? I'll keep going since Katrina's still getting situated, but does anybody have any questions for Ryan? And then we now open this hearing to comments from members of the public. Kindly note public comment on any other issue besides the adoption of the budget should be held until the appropriate segment of the regular meeting following this hearing. Does anyone wish to comment or have any questions related to the adoption of the 2023-2024 proposed budget? Hearing none. I think at this point I'd seek a motion to adjourn the public hearing on the adoption of the 2023-2024 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Belle Jordan.
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Vonnegut.
Yes.
Ruffner.
Yes.
Sturban.
Yes.
Sullivan.
Yes.
Warshaw.
Good evening and thank you to my colleagues. We will now open our meeting for public comment. Please remember that this is not a dialogue between you and the board. If you have a specific issue which requires a response, Superintendent Garwood or the appropriate person will get back to you. Please state your name and your connection to Skokie School District 68, and please limit your remarks to no more than 5 minutes. Finally, avoid comments specific to any person, student, or staff member, respecting their right to privacy. Do we have any public comments?
We did receive one write-in submission for a public comment. A parent named Stephanie Maitland has a short comment here, and it is good afternoon or good evening at this point. Is it possible to get a handout or a brief cheat sheet on what teachers are teaching when it comes to gender identity and sexuality at the elementary school level? Thank you for your cooperation. Dr. Samajedny and I will respond to her tomorrow.
Thank you, Jen. So now we move on to superintendent's reports. Jen?
Our first one this evening is our 6th-day enrollment report. I'm happy to report that after enrollment that's been kind of gradually going down for about 5 years in a row, it's starting to come back up. So Mr. Berry will lead you through that.
As Dr. Garwood mentioned, our elementary enrollment is up 5.1%. We saw a nice rise in our kindergarten numbers overall compared to last year. District-wide, we're up 3.6%, and that's mostly due to the elementary enrollment. Junior high enrollment was up 3 students, so, not very significant there, but an increase is an increase, right? Overall, the biggest increase at the elementary buildings was Devonshire. Devonshire's up, over 40 students compared to last year. Breaking down students by race compared to last year, very similar. We are a very diverse student body in District 68, and that has not changed since last year. Lastly, when looking at free and reduced numbers, we are slightly up from where we were at this point last year, looking at about 56% free and reduced at this point. Typically, at this point of the year, we're right below 50%, and then when we send out fee bills towards the end of September, we get a lot more people coming in and providing more of those waiver forms. But overall, not very significant changes from last year, other than elementary numbers are up about 5%.
Questions?
Just, so the vast majority of those kids ended up at Devonshire, has that created any, was that known in advance or was there enough staffing?
If you'll recall, a few years ago, we actually changed the boundaries a little bit because Devonshire's numbers were going down, while Highland in particular was going up, and it was getting to an almost untenable position, so we made some adjustments there. And I think what we're seeing now, part of that enrollment increase in Devonshire is because of the boundary change we made, I think, 4 years ago. And we did it in such a way that it was going to be very gradual. I think it's starting to catch up to our intentions at this point. So the numbers between our 3 elementary schools are very close to each other now, which is sort of our ideal state.
Any more
I think so.
questions? Okay.
All right, our second superintendent report this evening comes from Highland. Dr. Bradley, I believe, will introduce our teacher team. This is a fantastic presentation they're going to make. I had a chance to preview it today. I think you'll be very excited to see this.
Okay, so to quote Ryan, thank you for inviting us here. We're happy to be here tonight, and our team is going to present an aspect of social emotional learning that we've been working on at Highland for the past couple of years. It's grounded in the Learning for Justice standards, the social justice standards from the Learning for Justice organization. And I'm really happy to say that this is a teacher-led initiative. These are the architects, these are the capacity builders. My job is really to provide advice and space for the work, but the teachers have really taken the lead. So here tonight, we have Megan Looney, who's our science teacher. Megan was involved in this work even when she wasn't full-time at Highland. Alexa Pascarella, one of our third grade teachers. Nicole Cooney, one of our fourth grade teachers. And Anna Johnson, our instructional coach. And they're gonna take it from here.
So yes, thank you so much for letting us come and talk today. This is something we love and care about. And so we're excited to share our story. So first we have a slideshow just kind of talking about like how it started. And then we have a video that kind of shows where we're at now. So it started in 2020, summer 2020, when we all felt like we had a lot more learning to do. And so we started by learning as humans, and over the summer, a couple of teachers decided to learn together over Zoom. And we did podcasts and books and videos on different subjects, like how to be an anti-racist and history of race, and then we'd come together and discuss. And then fall of 2020, we kind of changed our lens to learning as educators. And we still did all of that same thing, but we also added a book club, and then even more staff members joined. And then fall of 2021, we were ready to turn it over to the kids. And that's how our Learning for Justice committee started, and then we have subcommittees with that.
So one of the things that impressed me the most with joining this group a little bit later was the intentional planning that went into place. So really looking first at what does Skokie 68 already have, and one of those tools is Ruler. And that really helps us to value emotions, because as we know, that's an essential part of this work. Then we leaned into, as Dr. Bradley said, Learning for Justice's social justice standards. They additionally have created critical practices for K-12 educators. And from those, we developed enduring understandings and essential questions for our students. The third component of our intentionality is really making sure that the resources we're leaning on and who we're learning from is representative of Skokie 68 learners. One example of that is this book, Raising Anti-Racist Children by Britt Hawthorne. She really takes a developmentally age-based approach for different topics that we've been focused on. A next step that we did was write a mission statement to stay really grounded in our goals. This is the latest iteration of that was rewritten over the summer. We wanted to ensure that we, as leading the committee, but also staff members, knew where we need to go, where we're at, so that way everything we were doing had clear intentionality.
So like they were saying, we use the social justice standards. There's so many and they're all so good. So we knew we needed to slow down and just focus on one at a time so we could really dig deep. So the first one we focused on was identity. So the next few slides are kind of like what a unit looked like. So we started with the staff modeling with making bio slides, and this was TAs, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, teachers, and we got to know more about our staff members as teachers, and as certainly the kids, and then they could make connections with them that they never knew about before. Then the kids did it themselves by making identity posters, and those were on lockers, in classrooms, in school hallways. And then we used lots of read alouds, and then they switched over to their family identity and made posters and visuals to go with that. And then we shared those identities with our buddy classes. We also had an opportunity to make a big H for Highland, and each of those says a different kind of an identity, like I'm bilingual, I'm a problem solver, I'm a mathematician, and you could sign or do your thumbprint on which ones go with you, so you see who else connects with you. And we also did an identity parade where we walked around the building with representing our identities.
So the intersection between social emotional learning and learning for and teaching social justice was illuminated for us over the course of this journey. We had social emotional learning, and then we started this learning for justice, and it at first was very separate, but through the course of our work, we've realized that they go hand in hand. And a big part, this is mainly because we need to fully, understand our own identity, who we are as people before we can even begin to connect and understand others. And this work is grounded in empathy and empathetic capacity and connecting with other people. So we, this work at Highland, sort of, the students' first work at this is typically classroom charters, where students work together to create basically norms for their learning community, how they wanna feel and be treated when they're working together in their learning communities. We extended this last year. Typically, the classroom charters is where those stayed, but we extended it last year to a whole school charter that was developed over or during a all-school assembly. So every student had a voice in determining what went on that school charter. Then we wanted to continue the extension to family charters. So we had some of our teachers, some of our staff volunteer to create their own family charters, and not as a gimmicky thing, but they took their families through the process, and then they shared with us. The top is Miss Barnett, a first grade teacher. Our bottom one is Mrs. Talbert, our librarian. She videoed her family talking through the whole almost probably 20-minute process, and then allowed teachers to share that video with students so that they could feel what that process looked like, or see what that process looked like and felt it, and then took it home to their own families. And we had several Highland School families create their charters, and then they shared back in different ways, which was really lovely to see. We even had little groups of friendships creating their own friendship charters to help themselves manage their relationships. And then along with that, we had at Highland School soccer, and Pokemon in particular pops up for us. They were activities that were a source of conflict for students, so we, again, instead of doing what we might have done in the past, which is to maybe ban soccer for a week or take certain students out of playing soccer or not allowing the children to bring Pokemon cards to school at all, we looked and worked through our restorative justice lens and tried to get away from the punitive and look at how can we continue to allow these students to engage in these activities that they love. So we did that again by helping them create charters for these activities. We put other structures in place to help them be able to continue to participate in those. And then, sorry, click here. And again, a major component is getting away from the punitive and more the restorative nature of problem solving. And we realized again through our work that students, adults and students, we can't get to the restorative piece of conflict resolution if we are at our highest highs or lowest lows, if we're dysregulated. So we again turned to tools that we already had and had been using, but maybe differently, but leaned on them to help us understand the importance of self-regulation in terms of conflict resolution, and we worked to teach students coping strategies and skills so that they could get to that calm in order to start to learn how to restoratively repair in times of conflict. And then another example of a tool we already had in place, and I think teachers were using the blueprint, but maybe in very different ways. This provides teachers and students with sort of a script to some of those restorative conversations. So we've turned to this tool. This is one of the last pieces or the newest pieces for us to kind of focus on. So it's definitely going to continue to be a highlight moving forward for us in our work.
So we've talked a lot about how students are learning, but the adults at Highland are learning too. At our staff meetings, we regularly discuss different social justice topics or topics that come up amongst our students. We also have opt-in activities as well. Usually on a monthly basis, we have a coffee chat where staff members are invited to be able to bring a topic that's maybe arisen in their classroom. These are a few examples of some of the topics that have come up. And we also have passive professional development as well, where staff might have brought up a topic and then we can respond if a student has had a question or a topic's come up. So to be able to educate in a more passive way too.
And we'd like to end our presentation with a short movie that we put together. We wanted to really find a way to highlight the voices of our students and staff about the learning that we've been doing and what we've taken with us. And so we wanted to share that with you tonight and to let you know that these questions that we asked the students, these were their first answers. They were not given the questions ahead of time. They didn't even know what they were. Yes.
Now I'm in.
Very thoughtful. Yeah.
So, this is the why.
Yeah. Thank you. These are our whys. I forgot to say the most important.
At Highland School, we understand that creating a just and equitable learning community in which all members feel safe, valued, and cared for is paramount.
As students at Highland School, we promise to help each other feel safe, happy, and included in all parts of our school community.
In the areas of culture and climate, curriculum and instruction, and family and community engagement, we are committed to using a shared language of justice, acceptance, and restoration.
We've spent time thinking, talking about, and practicing different ways to do this.
We are dedicated to creating, with integrity, organizational structures that help engage staff, students, and our community in deepening understandings around diversity and belonging through anti-bias, multicultural, and social justice education.
When we're not honoring this agreement, we'll work together to bring each other back to the values of our promise.
The things that make you you, so like your hobbies, your like religion, like culture that goes with religion, and your likes and dislikes, like all those things make like you, makes you Sophia, it makes you Trinity, it makes you who you are.
Do you think it's important for people to talk about their identities and share pieces of their identity with others?
I think that it is important because if you share your identity, people get to know you better. Like if it's dislikes and likes, if you know the like or dislike, it's like bonding and getting closer. I think if you know my identity, for me, it makes me more confident about myself and more proud of who I am and not like taking myself down like, oh, I think this is weird about me. So if you know like who you are, I think you'd be like more confident and be more happy about yourself and not let other people try to take you down or make you feel bad about yourself.
Bruce, why is it important to show empathy to others?
So they can feel welcomed and braver. Sometimes they need it. It's important to have empathy, to care about others.
Where does empathy come from?
Your heart.
What do you mean?
Like, if you know someone is sad, you ask them and care about them. And if you're not caring, that's not showing the full thing about empathy.
I think when you're talking about identity, it's
that makes them unique, special, and, well, be yourself. I mean, we were talking about this earlier in class, we were making our class charter, and one of the things I was saying was be yourself. Because if you think about it, some people might want to hide themselves from being themselves. Because if they don't, they might be scared to tell about religion or stuff like that because they don't want to get made fun of. But if you really share your identity, it could also make you make friends or have fun.
And also you have different things that you're good at, and then other people can learn from you, from other people, so they can be good too.
Layla, what is it that makes your classroom feel like a real community?
Being included and feeling safe, and also feeling motivated to learn, and just feeling like everyone is supporting you.
How do you know if you're really included in something? What does that feel like?
You want to feel happy and motivated, and you want to feel a part of something, like if it's a community, family, or just a group. You want to feel like you're in the conversation, and you're in all the comments, and you're getting in people are listening to you, so they know what you're saying and feel listened to.
Can you elaborate a little bit on those feelings you get so that your mind and body both know that you belong?
I think you gave me a keyword there, the body. Yeah, you are not being mentally or physically hurt. You are, again, coming back to that big word that's kind of the whole principle of this question, included. You feel safe. It's another big one. That enough insight?
Your mind is going to feel safe.
You know that if you give the wrong answer, Mrs. Ledford talks about this quite a bit, that no one's gonna laugh at you. They're just gonna, try to teach you again, and hopefully you get it right that time. And it's okay to be wrong.
Last year, the third graders and fifth graders were having a bit of a hard time sharing recess time and the playground space safely and thoughtfully. In the past, before our work, how would you have handled a situation like that?
I definitely would have had a conversation with the whole class, a very nice conversation, I think. Probably would have been punitive in the way that I probably would have maybe taken away recess or had more of a very stern conversation with them, not hearing their side, not hearing third grade side, and me giving them how they should feel about the situation.
You did not handle the situation punitively and instead handled it very restoratively. Can you tell us about what you did do?
So after speaking with Alexa and finding out how her third graders were feeling, I had her class write letters without using any names to my kids, explaining how they felt, explaining what was happening, and how their actions were hurting them on the playground. And I read it to my fifth graders, and then immediately after, I had them write down how they felt about the situation after hearing their actions to those third graders and how they were going to handle it and fix it and move forward with the situation at hand.
Can you tell us how you and Alexa decided on this approach?
Well, I didn't really know about it until one of our social justice coffee talks, and it came out that we were supposed to meet with her classroom. We signed up to play Mancala, and she had said that her third graders were afraid to play with my fifth graders, and that's how it just built from there. I definitely see the bonus of the restoring behaviors and restoring the relationships as opposed to the punitive. I think this is the first time I've ever done anything like this, and it was definitely, I saw the change in the kids and the excitement in the kids and how they really understood their actions do matter and what they say to others. And I'm hoping it transfers and continues with them in the future.
Well, I feel like, so you also asked me a question that I didn't answer because I was thinking about the other question because you asked me to. But you asked me why is it important to learn about discrimination? Why is it important to learn about like identity? Because for example, discrimination, like I was saying, happens when something kind of you're like discriminated against when you can't do something or people leave you out or make fun of you because of something you like. That something you like is identity. So learning about discrimination is connected to learning about identity. And also, like, for example, discrimination is against your identity. So something from your identity is doing to discrimination. Because I also noticed something where at the very, very, very beginning of the year, we talked about that a lot during writing time. And one of the first entries after we talked about that was about racism and
Discrimination.
Discrimination. So they're connected and we need to learn about both and avoid doing that and to avoid doing it. Because also, if you feel bad about that, empathy is another big part. So every single thing that we learned about in this subject is all connected in my opinion. They all are part of one. All these questions are all connected to each other.
If we talk about racism and we talk about discrimination at Highlands, why do you think that is important for us to explore that at all ages in Highland School?
I think that's a good thing to do is because to make sure we don't do it again. Because a lot of people have been hurt and like socially or like physically hurt by racism and discrimination, and so we need to learn about it so to make sure we never do that ever.
In general, we have such a culturally diverse student body that focusing on these ideals gives you a lens in which to see the world. And I think when you open yourself up to seeing the world in a diverse way, in a different way, perhaps in a way that you weren't accustomed to before or had never thought about, it naturally ties in to the intersection of your teaching. And what I mean by that is it has allowed me, I think, to be more, to attack my teaching with more clarity in terms of who am I teaching to? What is the type of instruction I want to resonate with them? Is there ways in which I can tie in things that are important to my students? Are there ways in which I might have seen the world in a slightly biased way that I can now open my perspective to, which I think makes me a better person, makes me a better listener, and thus makes me a better communicator, which I would hope translates into being a better teacher.
Okay, so in my experience of teaching some of the learning for justice standards with my class, I can't pinpoint an exact moment, but there have been many times where we might be discussing how certain groups practice religion, and their eyes light up when you mention like the Muslim faith or Tibetans do this. I think it's maybe in kindergarten one of the first opportunities where they hear from somebody who isn't family about their community, and they recognize that, right? they get excited, and it helps for building connections because they understand that you have a little bit of knowledge about what they do in their lives.
And these lessons, it's just given me that power to be proud of my family and not feeling like I need to hold something back, because this is a safe space and I want that for all of my students as well.
I really think that us modeling these conversations and us having these conversations is important because ultimately that's what we want our students to be able to do, both now as kids, as teenagers, and as an adult. We want them to be able to have these conversations and help learn more about who they are, how they fit into the world, who they are in connection with other people. It's extremely valuable, and I've been really, really proud of the types of conversations and the amount of work that we've done here at Highland.
Some shy.
So that was a really quick overview of but we did some clips a year and a half ago, and the work hadn't really sunk in. But I think you can see from these clips that it is starting to really sink in, so we're super proud of that.
Also elocution and articulation.
Did you have any questions?
I don't have a question, but I just wanna say thank you guys so much. Like, this is what classrooms and communities should look like, so I just really appreciate it, and I know it's not easy work, and so thank you so much.
I can't think of a better exemplification of our strategic plan, and sometimes, you know, it's hard to articulate how that really, you know, gets down to the classroom level and with kids and stuff. And you guys hit probably 75% of our strategic plan, you know, with great examples of how you're changing our kids' lives and their environment. So thank you very much.
Thank you again for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.
How do we move forward after that?
Yeah,
Yeah, I feel bad for the next school that's.
Thank you.
We got a month.
Thank you.
Not a competition.
Sorry, not sorry shirt.
I know, I love it too.
I'll tell her mother. It was just like perfect for that video.
Yeah. So Jim, do we have any additional superintendent
We
reports?
do not have any additional superintendent reports.
Well, with that, next item of business is the reading and acceptance of minutes. May I have a motion?
I call for a motion to approve the minutes from August 17th, 2023 Board of Education regular session meeting.
Second. Joseph?
Yes.
Vanderbilt?
Yes.
Ruffner?
Yes.
Sturbins?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Boardwell?
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, you didn't know he was there.
I didn't know. It sounds like Ryan, he's like under your.
Forget he's there.
Surprise!
Just checking, Joe, make sure
You need a little
you're paying
picture of
attention. All right, well, the consent agenda is our next item of business. Does any member wish to remove any item for separate consideration? If no, then may I have a motion?
I call for motion to approve the consent agenda as presented, which includes the personnel report, authorizing the hire, leave of absence, change of status, and the resignation of licensed staff. Hire, change of status, resignation of classified staff, including the termination of Carl Pasco from the Transportation Department, financial reports, pay orders, and expenditures.
Second.
Vanderbilt?
Yes.
Ruffner? Durbin,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Sorry,
Yes.
Ruffner, yes, I was on mute.
Warshaw,
Yes.
Bill Jordan,
Yes.
Joseph.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we have some reports and discussion items. We'll start with the Devonshire Capital Project.
All right.
Should be looking at you, Ryan.
Well, I am not the expert by any means, but as part of the strategic plan, one aspect was to look at ways to reduce our carbon footprint. So as we were kind of examining future upgrades at some of our elementary schools, we went back to our architects and engineers and said, you know, kind of what's a different way we can kind of do this? You know, what's a different way, maybe something other than air handling units in every classroom that we can kind of look at really changing our overall mechanical system. Because when you build a new school, a new building, they don't put air handling units into every classroom. But when you have an old school with the air handling units, you have to add ductwork and other things. So our engineers came back and brought tonight Keith Christian. I can never get that right, I'm sorry. At least I didn't call you Zoe, but, sorry. What they came back with was a geothermal type plan for Devonshire and for Highland as well. And geothermal, very, you know, new age kind of thing, right? I think I heard it, I'm like, okay, so like Iceland, right? You know, like that's what we're thinking of. But it's becoming a little more popular in the area. Essentially, they take a drill about 5 or 6 inches in diameter and drill 500 feet into the ground 30 to 40 times. Is that accurate? About. Okay. And do you want to explain this? I mean, I'm sure you.
We're fun watching you explain.
It's kind of fun.
It's fun to watch you struggle.
You know, mechanics is not my thing.
Numbers, give us numbers.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm happy to take over and kind of give a general overview.
Yes, please.
So Ryan said, you know, this new emerging technology. I want to be clear that that's not the case. Geothermal's been around since the 70s. It is gaining traction in our area because people are learning how to do it. I've personally designed and installed 65 successful geothermal projects in the area. Glencoe school districts, all 3 of their schools are geothermal. Meyer School and 73.5. Those are just the ones that are close by. And I mean, I have in design 5 or 6 projects that are going to be geothermal right now. Big buzzword around the industry is electrifying the grid, right? How do we get ourselves off of the carbon-based energies and into the future of energy independence? And right now, without a clean source of ComEd energy, really the only way to do that is to save BTUs and save therms. And the best way of doing that is with the geothermal system. So in our heating mode, we're gonna be 400% efficient from electrical use. So for every 1 kilowatt of energy we put in, we get 4 kilowatts of energy out. So that's gonna reduce the annual operating cost of the system by about 20% in the summertime during cooling mode, because we're so much more efficient in the cooling season. And then it's gonna decrease the heating energy by about 80%. So the cost savings to the district is gonna be substantial. The environmental impact in carbon reduction on the footprint of district property is you're gonna go from hot water boilers that are 80% efficient to a geothermal system, which is almost negligible carbon footprint on site. We still have the ComEd grid to deal with that is not caught up to where we want to be for carbon independence, but it's getting there, and hopefully in the near future we'll get there with them. So to Ryan's point, right now every classroom has a unit ventilator. It's the big box at the wall, makes a lot of noise. You know, temperature regulation's a little bit difficult. There's no humidity control. At Devonshire, and I believe Highland specifically, there's issues with how those were piped and how they reject their condensate, which has caused flooding and operational issues over the years. So moving away from that type of system, we can put the units and the fan and the noise inside the closet and away from the student occupied space. And then we would be able to discharge the air through a system of ductwork. It's gonna be quieter, we're gonna have better temperature control, and we'll have a dehumidification built into that system. So indoor air quality is gonna be a lot better, the comfort is gonna be a lot better, and the indoor acoustics are gonna be a lot better. And then energy savings and decarbonization. So,
as Keith mentioned, he took us on a field trip up to Glencoe to kind of check out one of their schools, and I think that program in and of itself has been there about 7 years.
Glencoe Central, I think, was 2016, that was our first installation there, and we did that installation over the course of 2 summers. 3 years later, they asked us to do West, and then 3 years after that, the board asked us to do South. So by the time they got to their 3rd school, they're saying, you know, these 2 schools are saving us all kinds of money and we're spending so much energy at South. Now's the time, you know, our equipment's aging. It may last a couple more years, but let's get ahead of it and get it on even with the rest of the schools. So.
Interestingly enough, that same day that we went and visited Glencoe, walking through the classrooms, hearing, kind of being in the classroom, I was at a curriculum night for my own son. And I was sitting somewhat in the middle of the room, not listening to the teacher, but listening to the air handling meter. And there wasn't even a paperclip in it, it was just on. I'm like, okay, this in of itself is much, much different. As Keith mentioned, it's cost effective, it reduces the carbon footprint. It is a little more upfront cost, than a similar program that we already have in there. Luckily enough, much like the solar program that we saw last year, there are federal grants and other things that pay some of that back. Right now, it's anywhere between 20 and 30% of the entire program, or the cost of installing this. The increased cost roughly is about $1 million, all in for the mechanical type system. However, that all in, I think we expected it to be about 5 million, I think, just for the mechanical part of it. So you think about 30%, it actually gets us right to, if not slightly below, where we would be if we replaced everything in Lake County. New boilers, new chiller, new units. So, you know, does the cash flow off about a year or so, trying to get some of those incentives back? Yes, absolutely. However, as Keith mentioned, less carbon, less noise in the classroom. What was the third thing?
Indoor air quality.
Indoor air quality.
To say the least.
Overall less money for the long run too. I mean, it fully makes sense. The interesting part is looking at potentially Devonshire, Highland doing this, is where to put this drill field, right? So looking at, you've got a large area of playground at both the south part of Devonshire and the west part of Highland, and then kind of give us an area to drill, again, 30 to 40, maybe a few more little 5-inch diameter holes, 500 feet down. Seems like a lot, like that's.
That then get covered back over for.
Yes, sorry, yes.
At the end of the process, specifically at Devonshire, right now we're looking at that south hardscaped area. Underneath, about 2/3 of that is gonna be the bore field. And it's a 50-year warranty on the piping, and we don't know how long it's gonna last. It could last 100 years. It's the same piping that the gas company uses. Nothing really eats it. So unless somebody hits it with a backhoe or something, it's gonna be there for the life of the building. When we're talking about boilers and chillers, you're gonna be replacing those every 20 to 25 years. You're gonna be replacing the central system every 100 years. So I mean, just the life cycle cost of the geothermal system, you're gonna pay it back after 25 years when you would have to normally replace those boilers. A little bit off topic, back to the hardscape. Once they're gonna tear up that whole hardscape area, they're gonna install the bore field, and then they'll cover it back up, patch it with asphalt, and you'll never know it's there.
Right, I mean, there are opportunities, at Glencoe, they put green space out there, so they covered it in grass, for a play field, so there's a few opportunities there. But Keith mentioned, really the only thing outside that you would ever know that anything is there is basically a, 3 by 2 foot,
We call it a quasi box. You see them, the phone company, the Comcast uses them. I mean, it's a tan box that sits in the ground. In Comcast and phone companies, it's full of wires. In our situation, it's full of valves.
So again, nothing that you would really ever notice. I know some of you are probably thinking, why don't we do this last year, right? Well, unfortunately, when the two main reasons, when the strategic plan came out, that kind of set us off to look at more sustainability, do that kind of thing, and that's when we really brought the attention of the architects, is like, we want to do something different. Also, at Stenson, old mechanical equipment was failing and replaced not so long ago at Stenson. They had a relatively new chiller, less than 5 years, had some new boilers, about 7 years old. And financially, it just wasn't right to rip out equipment that had a long life expectancy left. It didn't make financial sense to do that. So, but I think we're excited about the potential, Devonshire Highland, looking forward to doing those two.
Am I correctly not sensing any objections to pursuing this?
I was just curious as to why, what would be the advantage of using a geothermal versus an air source heat pump system for the schools? There's a lot of states that have been doing one and a lot that have been doing another, and so I was just trying to, since you're the expert, trying to figure out what would be.
So, air source heat pumps, the colder the outside air gets, the less efficient they get, and the less ability they have to heat. So, if you take a typical air source heat pump at 17 degrees, they're gonna basically be electric heating, and anything below that. So, and not only are they only 100% efficient at that point, which is what electric heat is, you get 1 kilowatt in, you get 1 kilowatt of heat out. That's electric heating. So as your ambient temperature drops, your air source heat pump gets closer and closer to that 1-to-1 output. Now you can get higher efficiency ones that can get up to like 1.5, times better, but they derate. So even your most efficient air source heat pump at 0 degrees is only going to give you 50% of the heat output. It'll give it to you at 150%, but now you need twice as much equipment to get the same amount of output. So yes, it's 100% efficient, but now you need 2 of them. So it's almost the same as electric heat. So geothermal, it doesn't care what the outside temperature is. The ground is always the same temperature. So our heat rejection medium is always the same temperature, and we're always looking at the same efficiencies. So we don't have a decrease in heating capacity output, and we don't have to oversize the equipment. So that's my spiel on air source heat pumps.
A quick question, and I apologize if I missed this, but we're looking at Devonshire and Highland, and we're not necessarily discussing right now or thinking about Stinson. And did I miss a piece where that wasn't in the conversation, or is it just not one of the schools that we've been looking at?
Well, Stenson, we just replaced all of the air handling units this past summer.
Okay. So these are the 2 schools, and Old Orchard does, similarly doesn't.
Old Orchard is probably a high potential down the road. Old Orchard's a different animal because of its size and different ducts and things like that. But specifically looking at the next few summers, at these 2 schools are kind of on the agenda to kind of revamp interior and the roof at Devonshire, much like we did Stinson this year.
Right, I think you shared that the old orchard equipment has some years of life left to it, so an optimal time might be
It does, one of the
more towards the
chillers.
replacement time there.
Right, so one of the chillers there is relatively new. Yeah, I mean, it's got some years left in that building, but I definitely say within the next 5 or 10 years, we probably would need to start looking at that building as well.
So this potential option is most optimal for these two at this particular point for us to consider. Okay. So Jim, what would our next steps if there was, interest in, you all considering moving forward? Would it be, costing out, or, I'm just curious of what would you be needing in terms of input from the board?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're already.
Sorry, real quick. I mean, once we got sort of a straw poll that you guys were supportive of the idea, then mine would take the next steps.
Yeah, I mean, we're already starting to kind of design what Devonshire would look like with this, and then overall, when we brought back bids for you all to approve, we'd go out to bid with kind of this in mind. Brought back, that would be the official stamp of approval is the bids, but it takes a lot to plan, design this, and do all that. So, yeah, I mean, right now I think it's our best opportunity to move forward with the redesign of the interior Devonshire. It gets the univents out, as Pete said, it's put in a little closet in each room, but doesn't really take up that much floor space of what we already currently have. And then when you lose the univent, you're also gaining, floor space as well for additional cabinets. So I think overall there's really a net gain of storage. Plus all the other advantages, I think I don't see any downside.
What's the projected, you've got the upfront cost, and then what's the projected period of time before we sort of, especially like with the Inflation Reduction Act or whatever federal thing it is that gives us some portion of that back, how long is it projected to sort of pay for itself based on those cost savings of heating and cooling?
I would expect, it to be finalized in FY 25, right? Fiscal year 25, the summer of 24, everything would be finalized with the program. And then we would start that kind of, applying and everything back. Hopefully by the end of 25, we start seeing some of those incentives coming back. Because then, the summer of 25, leading into FY 26, we're doing the same thing at higher. So hopefully that comes back, we start paying and that kind of thing. But there's a company that 2010, the engineering company and the architect have used to kind of help school districts do that application process. And that's kind of where we go, because I've never filled out one of those applications before, so we go work with the experts out there as well.
No, that was part of your question, looking for the break-even point, the
Yeah, just
financial
a bit
break-even
curious
point.
about it. One of the things that strikes me just hearing about Glencoe was like, we're spending all this money on the fossil fuels, and the other, almost like the savings here could subsidize getting that other system in the other schools. And I'm saying between that and like the break-even point, it's something that financially we might be able to think about after a few years.
Yeah, I think with the incentives coming back, the break-even point is gonna be 1 or 2 years. Just when we get the incentives back, it's gonna pay for the increased cost to install this system as opposed to basically a cut and paste system that we have now. I think that'll be very quick. And then very quickly after that, year after year after year, we would still put like a small quarter-size boiler just to make up heat because we are in, northern Chicago and winters get really cold sometimes, and just to make sure you've got a little extra heat. But other than that, the only, I think, natural gas that we're gonna use is for a domestic hot water pump, that's tiny, like the one you have in your house.
We,
Can't you do that with geothermal too, where you put some sort of heat pump,
because
water heat?
because these buildings are heating dominant, so I wanna speak to both points.
Yeah.
One about the domestic water. These buildings are so heating dominant, the required heat over the annual cycle dwarfs the cooling. So every BTU we take out of the earth that's not for heating the building is gonna be money, energy we have to put back in with a gas boiler to make that up. And then to speak to Ryan's point about this tiny boiler, so in this building, because we're so heating dominant, we could size the bore field for that, but at $20,000 a bore, you're gonna buy a $10,000 boiler and let it run for 12 hours a year. The early childhood school over for District 63 is also geothermal, and they've got a little boiler. I looked at the BAS trend logs on it, it ran for 6 hours over the winter time. So we're putting it in there so that we don't have to justify digging 4 or 5 more wells at 20 grand each. And it's really that, it's -10 and it's been -10 and it's going to be -10, that's when that boiler will finally kick in. I know Jason at Glencoe 35, the first winter he went through, he kept calling me, he's like, my boiler's not on. It's not going to turn on until the water temperature gets down to a certain level. So, well, it's not there yet. Well, that's good. It's working.
Wait, is it that easy? You just drag it to the trash?
So yeah, I mean, it's a little scary because it is a completely new mechanical system, that we in District 68 haven't run before. But as Keith mentioned, he's done 65 other schools that are currently using the same thing. And many, again, very close. East Main is right down Gulf, Glencoe is right up 41 or 94, whichever way you go. And then you say Meyer,
Yeah,
District
Meyer,
73. and
District 63, right down Gulf. I mean, we got a lot of them in the area.
Once we get a new blacktop out of it.
Yes.
Maybe playground.
Maybe some grass.
Maybe some grass. The options are not endless, but
There are options.
There are options, yes, there are options.
Do any board members have any concerns about pursuing this direction? Because that's what we really need to determine tonight, so that we can move forward, or know how to move forward. Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you both. We'll be back with more subjects.
If that's all right, is it okay if I?
Yes,
absolutely.
Thank you for
I don't
your
wanna miss all
time.
the
Thank you
fun.
very much.
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Well, Ryan, I guess we can move on to our financial forecast. You only have to sit down for a minute.
So if you guys will recall, we asked Ryan to kind of do an update on our financial forecast that would take into account several of the big projects that we're engaged in. This also, moving forward with geothermal will affect that as well. But the idea was to give you sort of a forecast. If we do these things and we look at, I think we have an estimate of 14 million for an early childhood center. How's that going to impact the budget, and how will the district recover? So that's the purpose of tonight's presentation, just to give you guys a little bit more food for thought about whether you're comfortable moving forward with an early childhood center.
Thank you, Dr. Garwood. Thank you, everybody else. This will be the last one, I think. Oh, no, maybe not. At least presentation for tonight. This presentation, the financial projections, typically I do in November. We usually have a little more information from the county in regarding tax revenue and EAV from the previous year. But as Dr. Garwood mentioned, just kind of looking at a forecast for the next few years if we were to do the Early Childhood Center and if we wouldn't. Just a basic overview, the intent of the projections is to identify trends. We take a very conservative approach when creating these trends. We look at certain percentages for our services and increase those going forward, a certain percentage of our salary and benefits and increase those going forward. Obviously, things change from year to year, the amount of staffing changes, every now and then there's a pandemic, it's just, it's a very broad overview of projections. Everything I say, typically you see that fall off the cliff thing, and that's because our expenditures are higher than our revenues. We don't have a lot of options to increase our revenues on a given basis, but our expenditures, we are allowed to cut staff, add staff, kind of change those things where we see fit. Anything that we don't see within the next 3 years, we can change. So, we can kind of see that forward, growth or decline, and we can change things acting accordingly when you look out 5 years. I say anything beyond 3 or 5, it's worse than throwing darts at a wall. What's and revenue assumptions that we look at, property taxes are still 80% of our total revenue. Again, we don't have 2022 EAV information yet, but based on the previous year, there was a decrease of 4.6%. In 2022 was a re-triennial or reassessment year, so I expect the EAV to go up in 2022. Tax cap was 5% again, which is the first time forever a few years ago, and that's going to be, the second time in 2 years is just mind-boggling to me. We've never seen it before in the profession. But the highest it had been before that was 4.1. We're looking at a 3.12% average going over the next 5 years when we're able to increase the levy, and that's again just the average over the last few years. New property decreased dramatically. It was 0 in 2019 and 2021, projecting 1 million going forward. Again, new property is really nice because it creates new revenue every year going forward. With those 2 zeros the last few years, as you can see over the last 5 years, it's only $185,000. The last 10 years, we had a nice big jump in 2017. And over the last 15 years, it's going to be hard to see that 2007 thing go, but that's when the Optima Towers were finalized and came off the tax roll. So next year when we do this, 2008 to 2022, it'll be much lower, but it's still there. Tax appeals are still an issue within the district. In 2022, they were over $1 million. 2023, last year, they were over $500,000. I expect that in that reassessment year, typically the refunds start to go up again. Everybody gets their new assessment. Oh my goodness, my house isn't worth that. However, if you offered them what the reassessment is in Cook County, they would never sell it for that much. But Cook County taxes don't get me started. Sorry. Most of our other revenue that we're looking at, we have relatively stable with minor increases going forward. Interest income, we expect to raise as at a low 1.75%. Lunch fees are supposed to stay consistent. State aid, federal aid. Last year, ESSER funds is this year. And then working cash bonds, we resell as soon as they come off the rolls, as we typically have in the past. Any questions on revenue? Not the exciting part. Sorry. Expenditure assumptions. Again, we are in the people business. Over 70% of our expenditures are on salaries and benefits. It's just what we do. Staffing increases over the next several years are based on needs. Increases are anywhere from 2% to 3.7% annually. It's offset by retirements most years, but we're looking at an 8% increase in retirement incentives and other benefits, and then a small 3.25% in Social Security and IMRF. And those increases are solely based on just typical salary increases for our classified staff. A few years ago, we paid off a lot of our unfunded liabilities to IMRF. So 2 years ago, IMRF costs decreased 50%. Last year was such a good year in their interest income, it decreased even more So we'll see how it does next year, because they're on a calendar basis, but right now our IMRF costs are at an all-time low because we paid off that unfunded liability a few years ago. And that's, worked off tenfold, way quicker than I could have ever imagined. Other expenditures or building projects are set to increase, obviously, Devonshire, Highland, we're looking at redoing those. Technology equipment have stabilized over the last 4 years. The tech department has done a nice job kind of doing this leasing, kind of, so we have a nice steady flow of cost there. Special ed tuition is supposed to increase at 8% every year. NTSE has done a wonderful job kind of keeping their costs relatively stable, but over the years, there have been a lot more issues and we've seen our sped numbers rise, which is I think much like many other school districts in the area. Contract busing is supposed to increase 8%. Those are special ed buses where we can't bus the students. It's either out of district, they need a special bus, and we're not able to provide that transportation. Utilities are expected to increase 3% annually. Looking at geothermal, a lot of those utilities I think will end up actually decreasing. But to keep that kind of conservative, consistent approach, we expect a 3% annual increase. Services, supplies, and all other capital expenditures, 5% increase. We've seen higher costs than that on some projects recently, but it's just a nice set number that we look forward, moving forward. So as you can see, this does not include the potential new ECC building in this projection. As you can see, kind of moving forward with the project at Stenson, at Devonshire, at Highland, redoing those buildings, you kind of see a little dip in there a little more quickly than you would in years past. Instead of kind of maintaining and falling off a cliff, it's kind of already a steady decline with a shift up at the end for the sale of working cash bonds. Any questions on expenditures so far?
I have a small question, with ESSER funding ending this school year, was that any significant impact for us?
Yeah, I mean, we're expected to receive probably another $400,000 to $500,000 in ESSER funding for different projects that are either pending or ongoing this year.
Okay.
So that loss of revenue is fairly significant. Yeah. Some of them were one time, so there were three. The first two had been spent mostly the prior 2 years, a little bit over in last year, and then ESSER 3 was the big one, which we could extend through the end of this year.
Gotcha.
Ryan, could I ask another hopefully quick question under expenditures?
Absolutely.
For example, in the case of special education, tuition, and even contract busing, I know this is a really high level overview, but what are the drivers of the increases in expenditures that you are able to project right now? So what are the drivers of some of these increases? Or the variables that are going into you assessing that they're going to increase, not necessarily exactly by these percentages, but generally?
I think just general trends. We are not in charge of any contract busing, for instance. NTDSE is in charge of all of our contract busing because we bus all of our own students, all of our gen ed students, and we don't contract any busing for those students. The only contract busing we use, NTDSE students, therapeutic day school students, and potentially every now and then we have some taxi cabs or something for some McKinney Vento type students of that nature. Again, things that we can't do ourselves. Any child that we can bus, we're busing. And that's, basically what I've told the transportation department and they have taken it on time. However, for instances of contract busing, talking to other business managers, and even the business manager at NTDSE who's dealing with that contract, there are some heavy increases that a lot of school districts have had the last few years. Looking at 10% increases, year after year, and just kind of renewing, We've done a nice job, Ms. Gavin over at NTD has done a nice job, kind of, maintaining. A few years we had 3, a couple years we had 5, and those were fairly significant wins for our contract busing compared to what we've heard from other school districts.
So basically following the trend line
Of
recent
other,
years
exactly.
is where you come up with that.
Exactly. Special education, again, that's just the tuition costs, just following a trend. Again, there was a big increase last year, but that was, for a rise of students. I know Ms. Jacobellis has really been trying to bring back as many kids as we can. That's why we've got the RISE program now. We're trying to help as many students as we can in our doors, in our schools, but just overall numbers are going up. So, it's not quite a national trend. It's a little bigger than just a local trend either. It's just kind of, what we've been hearing statewide, area-wide, things of that nature.
Thank you, thank you.
All right, so looking at the future, my job is just to, continue the prudent financial planning and ongoing review consistently of the expenditures to ensure that long-term for this fiscal stability of the district. We don't want to be, trying to get tax anticipation warrants or anything like that, but that's what you hire me for. Challenges to the trend line are increases for expenditures are obviously greater than revenue. As I mentioned, our revenue, we don't have a lot of opportunities to increase that cost year after year. We can't go out and sell more widgets. We can't go out and, buy something and, have a different revenue stream. It's just not how school districts work. What we can do is kind of help maintain a lot of the expenditures as much as possible. 80% of our education fund expenditures are personnel costs, and increasing at a greater rate because we see those expenditures going up and we don't see our revenues going up as quickly. There's always additional costs for special education, MTSS. That's just kind of where we see the most fluctuation in a lot of our programs year after year. Possible future enrollment shifts, growth and impacting staffing. As I mentioned, our elementary enrollment was up 5.5%, 5.1%. So we have a couple more elementary teachers this year. And when it stays that high and you have to keep those elementary teachers, that's an annual payment that you're making year after year after year, as opposed to a one-time payment for new playground equipment. That's something that you don't make as often. Program changes are always addressed, changing student demographics. A nice thing is, again, our student demographics, as mentioned earlier, the 6-day enrollment report, are fairly similar to where they have been the last few years. So I don't see a lot of change there. One issue that is new is the Cook County tax flow issue. As you remember last year, if you were a homeowner and had to pay your tax bill, those tax bills didn't come out until the end of December. The next one very quickly came out, usually February or March is when, it's always due at that point. But not getting any of our major revenue, 80% of our revenue comes from taxes. Getting a portion of that in March and then another portion of that in December, that's a nice big span that could create issues in the future. So watching those cash flows come in and out. Already this year, we're already working at about a $3 million deficit right now from where we started the year in July, because we haven't gotten any revenue yet. We're just paying payroll, capital projects, paying off some of those payments. $3 million is pretty significant because we haven't gotten any tax revenue since March. So just one more thing to look out for. Other strategic plan initiatives, we've got a learning environment learning team coming down the line. Luckily, we've got some other cost saving things, which, are coming down the line too, between solar, hopefully the geothermal, things like that. So a possible new ECC, without a new ECC, the projections are to finish the current year with about $50.5 million in the bank. Some of those are pre-Fed tax revenues. But then FY25 with about 42, FY26 with about 35. So FY26 under current conditions, we're looking at about less than 100% fund balance, which is still very stable, 92%. That's pretty good, not very many concerns right there. An estimated loss of about 13.8 million for a new ECC, which is 11.6 in construction, 2.2 in soft costs. And that changes the projection a little lower. The line still looks fairly similar, and that's because we have relatively consistent expenditures the next few years, but it just dips a little quicker than it did in the first one. As you can see, by the end of 2026, instead of 92%, you're looking at about 67%, and then it continues to go down. And that's really when the trends start kicking in, with a conservative approach, the expenditures really start jumping up. When looking at fund balances, the top chart is without a new ECC, the fund balances with a new ECC is below. And it really is just with the new ECC. It doesn't include any potential new teachers or anything like that that might go into the ECC. It doesn't also count any rooms we might rent out to NTDSE if we have got extra room, but it really is just with building a new ECC. Looking after, again, 5 years down the line is a long time. But potentially going from 71% fund balance to a 42% fund balance is significant. But there's a lot of school districts around here that live at a 42% fund balance.
There's a lot that live less than that too.
Right.
I think for us, it's a whole kind of new ballgame because District 68's never had a fund balance that low.
Right.
So it's sort of a mental shift in things, but 40% fund balance is still a pretty healthy fund balance, and it will grow back.
Right. It will, and it does get down to right about 40, a little less than 40, until we sell back those working cash bonds again in 27, 28. If it does get lower, there are other financial opportunities. We do have working cash bonds out there now. You could kind of sell them back, kind of reissue, if you will, going forward. You could reissue more. We've always maintained kind of that same exact dollar amount when we reissue them, so that our tax rate for the bonds does not increase. It's always been consistent going forward. But there are opportunities for growth there as well.
The other thing, if I can interrupt for a second, that I just always want to remind the members when you see these presentations and you see that sort of financial cliff, and then it looks like with Thelma and Louise, and you're about to just go over the ravine. Ryan's job is to put together a conservative approach, and when we say conservative, it means a lot of assumptions of worst case or close to worst case scenario. If things are bad, this is kind of what will happen. So when you see those charts, that's not how it usually ends up happening. It's usually more positive than presentations, but his job is to say, this is out there, that's out there. If these things, don't mitigate themselves somehow, this is sort of, I won't say worst case scenario, but a gloomier scenario than what's likely to happen sometimes.
Right, exactly. And it's not worst case scenario, and I say it's usually about 75% worst case scenario, right? Is it exactly what I think is going to happen? No, you know, if you went and looked back at the presentation I gave 5 years ago, would our, you know, starting balance of this year be what I said it was gonna be 5 years ago? No, absolutely not. You know, there were a lot of, again, predictions, you know, assumptions put into that it is kind of a, if this all happens, we need to look out. And again, in 3 years, if we're still working at a huge deficit, then we need to start making some decisions so that we're, you know, we're not totally at the bottom of that cliff.
The further you go out, the more like a weatherman you are.
Yes, precisely.
I mean, it's historic with the new ECC, it's never been done. I think the amount of families that'll benefit from that too, I think that's a huge game changer.
I have a quick question. I know we briefly talked about this, and I just wanna make sure I understand it correctly. So all of the new things that are going on at Old Orchard won't increase our revenue significantly because it's already a property that has already, I mean, like, they're putting in so much more than that, what currently exists. It's
Will it
not,
count as new growth?
yeah.
No, because
Oh,
Because it's on the same
it's the mall,
no.
I'm sorry, I was like.
Oh, sorry.
I misunderstood, I thought you
Oh, no, I'm talking about the mall. All of the big improvements, right, like it's drastically different of a footprint than what they currently have.
It's not considered new growth, and the old Lord and Taylor, which I think was you know, been vacant for roughly 2 years. And I think Noel, you mentioned it is what was the terminology? Like depressed, you know, it was
Yes.
it was depressed land. So they blank, yes. They actually got a special assessment reducing their commercial assessment, because commercial property in Cook County is assessed at 25% and residential is assessed at 10%. They actually, because it's a blighted property, got reassessed at that property at 10% for a few years, and then it'll increasingly jump back up to 25%. So it's not necessarily considered new property, even though it's gonna look completely new, right? One thing that the village will tell you very proudly that they did for us, which I'll give them credit, that they did not TIF Old Orchard Mall, which they could have done. Many other malls within the surrounding, you know, Collar counties have TIF'd some of their malls, but they have completely revamped, like taken out anchor stores and everything else. And they in turn made it a business district. So the mall in and of itself now is a business district, so if you look at your receipt, there's an extra like 1% tax or something on there. So it doesn't count as new property for there. Now, the new Chase Bank at the corner of Skokie Boulevard and whatever that little cross street is, that is new property. So, you know, I think I gave the example last month or a couple months ago, whereas if you tear down a residential house but keep the foundation and not touch the foundation, it's not considered new property.
Yeah, no, I just
Which
wanted,
is-
so I mean, at least there will be, depending on how much revenue the whole new thing that's going into Lord and Taylor, in theory, there will be some increases in revenue from that too, right?
There's
from
probably
time to
new increases in the CPPRT, it's the corporate property like replacement tax. So there is, you know, potential new revenue there, but it's not gonna hit our tax rolls as new revenue or new growth and kind of add to the levy at that point.
We do have some private, like there's Chase, there's the dental place right beside the synagogue, that's a new building that's gone up.
Correct.
There's also one that's on Old Orchard, that's sort of a little bit further west, from Old Orchard Mall, that they're putting a new development in, not this year, but next, I think.
Yes, just on the other side of the Edens, I think is a new apartment complex going up, hopefully within the next few years. I don't wanna look like I don't care about birds, but you know, the Carvana building that was going up was exciting because that was all new growth. you know, so, sorry,
Tread lightly.
You're just comfortable. I'm just laughing at your discomfort.
Yeah, that's not the group you wanna take up.
No, but as somebody looking out at, you know, the EAV of the district and the tax rolls and potential new growth, that was a nice opportunity for the school district to increase the revenue.
From a monetary perspective.
Yeah, we don't
I
think
was
you wanna
excited.
kill birds, right?
No,
No, you're
Joe's that.
He once rescued a baby bird outside the ESC.
I thought that was you.
Sorry,
Please
Ryan, I
continue,
tried.
Ryan.
So, yeah, I mean, overall, with the potential new ACC, you know, obviously spending an extra $14 million, it's gonna take a hit to the fund balance. I will say, not very many school districts have the opportunity to add an entire new wing, not a new program, but really extend a current program into a new building without going out to referendum or their taxpayers or selling bonds that aren't directly associated for that. There is that opportunity and potential here. That, again, not very many school districts, you know, can say they can do that. You know, but there are additional costs again that would go with it, additional teachers, additional custodial staff. I'm not sure if that's a part-time person or full-time person, you know, like going forward after that, just, you know, you're adding another 10,000 square feet, you know, our guys aren't sitting around, they're working the butts off as it is. You know, extra paraprofessional work there too.
But ultimately, the district will, the fund balance will increase over the years and.
Yeah, over time, it will, you know, it will get back. So, you know.
I really appreciate the kind of broad 30,000 foot, because I don't know if we were really ready to go to any kind of thinking at the ground level, but it helps to frame the opportunity, the challenges, and, you know, the different scenarios. So I know it's hard to do this to a certain extent because there's so many factors and variables that you don't know, and you're using historical data, you're also doing some projections, but I appreciate you giving us a framework to continue to think about this. Thank you, Ryan.
Absolutely. And you know, to that point, doing it a few months early is a little different. Because we don't have all the data yet for this year or for 2022 yet, so you know, it's still fun at the end of the day.
But the good news is if you enjoyed tonight's presentation, you'll get to see another similar presentation in a few months, right?
I would be happy to update this.
Can you give us like a side-by-side comparison to see how right you were?
You ready to bring last year's and put that in?
Alright.
Thanks, Ryan.
Yeah, so I guess.
So, giving you guys some more food for thought tonight. I think the next step that we would need is the nod, that, you know, the board is supportive of going this direction. Because then we would talk to our architects and they would start to design the school. You know, what they showed you last time was more of a footprint, you know, sort of the cost estimate. It wasn't, you know, the building wouldn't look, I mean, it might look like that in terms of the outer shell, but the interior will be, you know, designed at that point. Which, you know, there's gonna be more investment once they start coming up with architectural drawings and we start moving there, so.
So the commitment we'd be looking at considering is a more detailed, so really the commitment to hiring a firm to come in, the cost of hiring a firm to come in and really talk to us and think about what we really want this space to do and how we want it to serve, and then costing that out and modeling that. That's really what we would be committing to at this point, not, or would we be committing, are you asking us if we would be committing to the whole kit and caboodle?
I think, you know, at some point in the very near future, we need to, I think I'm probably, given the nature of such a large expenditure, I'm probably more comfortable with a formal board vote on this than I am, a straw nod. I think the magnitude of the decision, I think warrants, coming to a formal vote. You got a month maybe to think more about this and to come up with more questions. I think we'd be ready to bring it back to the October board meeting for your consideration.
And that would be an action item that we would decide on at the October meeting?
That's what I'm thinking.
And would we have those more detailed designs at that meeting, or would that be the launching point into those?
That would probably be, that would be the launching point.
Okay, I wanna make sure people know what we're.
Yeah.
As of last month, we felt like there was the go-ahead to get the surveys done, so, our architect went out and asked for some RFPs for surveys. Those have started. We're also surveying all the other schools, because we realize we don't have an up-to-date survey of any of the schools. And we'll need them actually for potentially Devonshire and Highland looking forward for the geothermal. So they're in the process of doing that. But they would need kind of that strong pull really to start diving into the results of the survey and kind of, what do they need to do to start designing a school, because they'll want to get paid for designing the school. And it'll take them quite a few months to put that together.
And can you remind me of remind us of a broad timeline if we came back in October after thinking through this and we're ready to move forward? Can you just kind of remind me of what that period of time would look like in terms of, building out the designs and bidding and all those things, or we're talking 2 years?
Breaking ground. And
Yeah, and I know there was a loose conversation about timeline last time, but I think this would be a good time to remind us.
Absolutely, if you give me just one minute.
I have a comment after Ryan can respond.
Sure, Joe.
If you would like to share your comment,
He's looking for something
I'm
on his
gonna find
computer.
the timeline that was presented last month.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm generally supportive. I think long-term, the long-term benefit of this at a time when we can afford to make the change, I'm hard-pressed to think of a way that we can invest in our infrastructure that would be a better payoff, though I encourage good ideas to come to the table at any time before we make this choice. I also know how Ryan budgets, and he is very conservative. He's a bird killer.
We were all
He's very conservative, and I have in the past gone through and looked at his projections as they've come into reality, and I still think, I don't see that 41% as daunting, especially with my belief that it won't actually get that low.
Nice summary, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.
And I didn't mean to give you an exercise over there, Ryan. It was just broad stroke, a year, couple, I mean, I know it's not a year, but a couple of years.
I thought it was 2026 fall that it was gonna.
Go through that.
It was like if we were
Sounds about right.
launching it in fall of this year for them to
Part
design
of
it.
it is that they'd be able to work on it year round. Once they get that shell up and they can work on the inside, then, we're not confined to working in the summertime. Because it won't interrupt
So Ryan,
too
don't
much the life of all the
don't worry about.
No, that's okay. It looks like formally would not go out to bid until roughly February of 2024. So there'd be a lot of designing within the next few months. Also working with the MWRD to make sure that new, because that in and of itself would take months and months and months to get approval from them. But really designing the next few months. I know Ms. Sullivan brought up last time where would all the therapy, where all the therapist offices and things like that. It really was a broad view of about this many classrooms, this much administrative space. Part of the survey will bring in a lot of the utilities, where are those, where do we, where do we need to pull water from, where do we need to extend sprinkler systems. And that in and of itself will take apparently until about February.
Okay,
Sooner about the better.
thank you. So we'll be back on this topic in October.
Thank you. All right, so we have an NTDSE report.
So unfortunately, neither me nor my alternate was able to attend the meeting, but thankfully I did get.
Understudy.
What's that?
Understudy.
My understudy, that's right. Neither of us were able to attend the meeting due to some issues beyond our control. However, I did get an update that was notes that Taryn did deliver that I think are useful for all of us. The first is they have been doing, as you know, construction on the Malloy NTDSE Education Center for a couple of years now, which has been just very challenging, as well as really beautiful. And I think now that that's wrapped up finally and done, they're extraordinarily excited to show people what they've built. So they are having an open house on Tuesday, October 3rd at 3:30 from 3:30 to 5. Last time I heard Taryn talk about this, she also mentioned she's going to try to get this woman whose son was one of the kids that was getting an education from Julia S. Malloy back in like the 1960s, when she was like ahead of the game for even trying to get education to children with disabilities. And that woman has been sort of following Malloy's story all these times. So I've seen a video about her, she's amazing. So I'm hoping Taryn's gonna actually get her to be able to come. So that's 3:30 to 5 o'clock on Tuesday, October 3rd. They're also in search of a host school for their summer school for 2024 school year, in need of approximately 28 classrooms for that. They are fully staffed with 23 new certified staff members. They had a really successful opening in not only at Malloy but also at all of the satellite areas. And they are getting an EL audit done, and special education directors reviewing the audit and discussing implementation. That's it.
Yeah, board members are invited to their ribbon cutting on the.
Yeah.
What,
If anyone's
29th?
interested in that, I have a link to an RSVP that they sent me that I'd be happy to share.
As are
They're very,
all
very
administrators.
excited about showing the public what they did. Like, this is just a huge deal for them, so.
Thanks, Dr. Sullivan.
Is there a date on that ribbon cutting?
It's Tuesday, October 3rd at 3:30 p.m. until 5. And I assume there's gonna be a really great tour, but it's an amazing place. That concludes the NTDSE September report.
Thank you. Well, whoever's the next reader, take a deep breath. We have the next item of business, being the adoption of the 2023-2024 budget. May I have a motion, taking note that the full resolution must be read by the board member who calls the motion.
I call for a motion to approve the adoption of the 2023-2024 budget. Whereas the Board of Education of Public School District Number 68, County of Cook, State of Illinois, caused to be prepared in tentative form a budget, and the Secretary of this board has made the same conveniently available to public inspection for at least 30 days prior to final action thereon. And whereas a public hearing was held as to such budget on the 21st day of September 2023, notice of said hearing was given at least 30 days prior thereto as required by law, and all other legal requirements have been complied with. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Education of said district as follows. Section 1, that the fiscal year of this school district be, and the same hereby is fixed and declared to be, beginning July 1, 2023 and ending June 30, 2024. Section 2, that the budget in its final proposed form be and the same is hereby adopted as the budget of this school district for the said fiscal year, thereby appropriating the sum of $32,663,069 from the education fund and the sum of $3,074,162 from the operations and maintenance fund and the sum of $2,345,000 from the debt service fund and the sum of $1,557,217 from the transportation fund and the sum of $934,000 from the municipal retirement fund, which amount includes $642,950 for Social Security and Medicare, the sum of $10,300,000 from the Capital Projects Fund, and the sum of $316,000 from the Tort Immunity Fund, and that a copy of said budget resolution be filed with the official records of this meeting, adopted by the Board of Education this 21st day of September 2023.
Second.
Oh shit, the audio stopped recording.
Next time Joe gets it.
Joe has to.
I know, you beat me to it, I'm gonna do it.
Sure you will.
You could have recorded it in advance and just played it.
Thank you.
Sturbins,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Marshall,
Yes.
Bell Jordan,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Monaco.
Yes.
Alrighty. So the next item of business is the approval of the Skokie Park District intergovernmental agreement for operation of after-school clubs. May I have a motion?
I call for a motion to approve the Skokie Park District intergovernmental agreement for operation of after-school clubs in the amount of $116,445.
Second.
Pretty self-explanatory. Any questions?
Sullivan,
Yes.
Warshaw,
Yes.
Bell Jordan,
Yes.
Joseph,
Yes.
Lonegro,
Yes.
Ruffner,
Yes,
Sturbins.
Yes.
In terms of communication and information, there was one request and or response for information under the Freedom of Information Act during the period of August 11, 2023 through September 14, 2023. On September 11, 2023, the district received a request from Janine Asmus from Burr Ridge, Illinois, requesting information to identify by employee name and work email address each and every district employee who is certified as a school librarian. The response was sent on September 13th, 2023. I need to read that, did I?
No.
Well, here we are, adjournment. So if there is no further business to come before the board, I call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
so moved.
You can second it, I so moved it already.
That's fine,
All right, I'll give it to you.
I never get to do it.
Are you seconding?
Are you going to second, Joe?
Take the second, Joe.
Second.
Thank you.